Ladies and gentlemen, is it on? Ladies and gentlemen, folks, as you're finding your seats, if everybody can also take a moment and make sure your cell phones are turned off. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, interment will take place at Arborcrest Memorial Park Cemetery. There will be no procession to the cemetery, but those of you who will be joining the family for the interment service, there are line-by-line directions for you available as you leave the sanctuary following the service. The family of Stephen Gill will be gathering through Monday evening at the residence 3051 Geddes Avenue in Ann Arbor. Friends are welcome to visit on Sunday and Monday from 6 to 9 p.m., with religious services being conducted each evening at 7 p.m. Those of you who wish to further honor Stephen's memory may best do so by means of a contribution to Temple Beth Emeth, to Jewish Family Services of Washtenaw County, or to Washtenaw Community College.
The Jewish people respond to the news of death with words of blessing. They are hard words to say, but they acknowledge that as much as we know of life, there is still so much we have no comprehension of. If you repeat after me, Baruch, Dayan, Ha'emet, blessed is the judge of truth. Our rabbis taught that there are three crowns: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But they emphasize that the crown of a good name excels them all. The book of Ecclesiastes states, Tov Shem min shemen tov, a good name is to be treasured above precious oil. Wealth, health, even life passes away, but a good name lives forever. It is this view that the Talmud teaches. Monuments need not be erected for the righteous. Their deeds are their memorials. They will be remembered and revered with the kindness they have shown, for the love they have given, for the shining examples of what it means to be a mensch. Words that feel like they were written for Steve. The words of Psalm 23. Mizmor David, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, v'nodeshet yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yanchileni. Nafshi yoshvev yancheni bemalgel et tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha, hema yanachamuni. Ta'aruch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai, dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yamei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. I'm never quite sure whom Psalm 23 was written for. Is it written for us, those who come to mourn Steve? Was it written for Steve as he walked through the valley of the shadow of death? His optimism ensuring he feared no evil. He was guided by rod and staff. And we read of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet wrote, "The eye never has its fill of seeing." Young or old, those who depart this life never see enough of the world, never complete their task, never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. How they yearned for yet another respite from the final summons, and how we yearned to have them close to us for yet another challenge in our lives, yet another joy, yet another precious moment together. God, be now with those whose hearts are broken, because whenever parting comes, it comes too soon. Console them at this moment. Be near to them when light seems distant. Sustain them, O God, until the time of healing. And of course, we all know that Steve died of disease. We all know that Steve should have had more time. That's, I imagine, what many of us feel in our hearts. And yet, let us hold on to the idea that death is better than a life of pain. And eternal sickness and eternal rest is better than constant sickness. Let us not seek to understand what is too difficult for us, nor search for what is hidden, nor be preoccupied with what is beyond. For we have been shown more than we can comprehend. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore, are our few days in eternity. The good things in life last for a short time, but a good reputation endures forever. It's my honor to invite our Cantor Emerita, Annie Rose, to sing a piece of music that wouldn't typically be in a funeral service. A song written many years ago by Debbie Friedman. Steve and Nan met at Osrui at Olansing Ruby in Economowoc, Wisconsin, where Debbie Friedman was the song leader there for many years. And it's my understanding that in Steve's final weeks that Annie would spend much time with him singing her music, bringing him comfort in those final weeks and hours.
Lechi lach, to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha, to a place you do not know. Lechi lach, on your journey I will bless you. And you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lechi lach. Lechi lach. And I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lechi lach, to the place that I will show you. L'simchat chayim, l'simchat chayim, l'simchat chayim, lechi lach. And you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lechi lach.
And he was a blessing. And so let us praise his name. It is my honor to invite to our bima Theo Jalaski, a childhood friend of Steve's.
So my name is Theo Jalaski. When I met Steve, I was Teddy Jalaski. We were 7. We lived on the same block, 6 houses away from each other. I lived at 2633 Joppa, and Steve and Charles and Dan lived at 2659 Joppa. We're just 6 houses away from each other. I don't remember when I met Steve. I mean, I don't remember the event. It's a long time ago. But I remember a bunch of other things, some of which I want to share with you. We were in the same Cub Scouts, Den 6, Pack 256. We went on our first date together, and it wasn't a double date. It was like a 1.5 date. When we were 9 years old, this is true, When we were 9 years old, we both wanted to ask Patty Gordon to go to a movie. So we did that, and Steve's dad and Charles and Dan's dad. Steve's dad took us, and my dad, brought us home. It might have been the other way around. I don't remember the movie. I was gonna look up last night what movies were popular in 1956. From second grade on, we went to the same elementary school together, same junior high school together, same high school together. We were a pair, Steve and I were a pair. We used to play football on our street. I don't know, Chuck and Danny, I think they might have played with us sometimes. Steve had a great arm, really tight spiral. He was a great passer. And I had pretty good hands and fast, and so we matched up really well that way. We were in high school. We had different spring sports. He was a tennis guy. I was a track guy. We both earned letters. And maybe 40 years later, we went to St. Louis Park High School, and our colors were orange and black, and we had a big P. Orange P was our letter. And about 40 years after he got his P, he gave it to my daughter, who went to the same high school. We both got our PhDs. I think we liked that. We talked some about it. His was from Northwestern and counseling psych, I think, counseling ed, counseling psych. I got my PhD here in Michigan at the Center for the Study of Higher Education. A very dear friend of mine, and Steve knew him well too, a man named Rick Heidinger from Minneapolis, put together a group of 4 people to do some research. It was Rick Heidinger, John Seeley, Peg Talbert, and myself. And they called the organization FARA, Formative Evaluation Research Associates. This was a long time ago, 1972. And FARA stuck around. I left Ann Arbor after I got my degree. But FARA stuck around for a long time, and Steve wound up working for FARA too. We both liked psychology, but pretty different. We're very different, I think, actually, our worldviews. Steve and I were different in some significant ways, I guess. He was a strict behaviorist. Steve was, so he would focus on positive and negative reinforcement. And I would call myself a strict existentialist, where I focus more on sorrow and despair than That's my wife, Sarah. I think she's laughing, smiling, nodding. We both liked sports. We loved sports. We played sports and we loved them. And I was a Vikings guy and he was a Lions guy. And because I got my degree here, I liked the Wolverines, but not when they played Minnesota. I was a Gopher guy. And I liked the Twins. He liked the Tigers. But my favorite team was the Yankees. I probably shouldn't say that out loud. It's not a good thing. Steve liked to play golf. He played what I call regular golf and hardly ever, rarely if ever, kept score. And I played miniature golf and I always kept score. We had another overlap. After I got my degree here, I moved to New York and worked at a small college for a couple of years and then decided to move back to Minneapolis. And on my way back from New York, I stopped in Ann Arbor for, I think, a day or day and a half. And that day was an overlap between the day that Steve and Nan came to Ann Arbor. That's nice. It's part of our being a pair. I had the good fortune of Steve introducing me to Jim Stillwell. We started a business together a few years ago. We did planning together, laughed together, did some good work together. There were three things I wanted to mention. Three more things I wanted to mention. Happened between me and Steve this year in 2019. This year. First one was in April. I came to visit Steve for 3 days. We had this wonderful time. Steve was doing well. He was driving. He picked me up at the airport, dropped me off at the airport, and we had dinner together and went out to a movie with a couple of his other Ann Arbor friends and watched NCAA basketball. And when he dropped me off at the airport, here's what I remember when he dropped me off. We both got out of the car, and we put our arms around each other. And two things I remember the most. One was we looked at each other in a way that we hadn't, in kind of a way we had never looked at each other before, and it was some acknowledgement that this was ending, not exactly ending. The friendship never ends; it'll never end. But that something was about to be over, and we didn't know if it was 2 months away or 4 years away, maybe 6 years away. We didn't know. I felt like Teddy Jaloski again. I hadn't thought of that. And the other thing is we looked each other in the eye and told each other that we loved each other. We hadn't done that but once in our life. Knew him for 65 years, so we were able to do that. In early June, Nan and Steve came to my daughter's wedding. It was such a gift. Just this wonderful gift. Thank you. I think you had just come back from a trip, and it just had to be hard. But the night before the wedding, I have this other friend, a guy I'd known since kindergarten, longer than Steve, Danny Fingerman and his wife Lynn. And they came in for the wedding too. And so Danny and Lynn and Steve and Ann and Sarah and I went to dinner, just the six of us. It's a long time to know people. And then the third thing is I came back to Ann Arbor about 3 weeks ago. To be with Nan and Steve, but I mean, truth be told, it was really to say goodbye to Steve, and he wasn't in very good shape. He was in Glacier Hills and pretty agitated, and I didn't know if he knew that I was there. I wanted him to know that I was there, so I was able to touch him and talk with him. But Nan and Jim both told me that they thought that he knew I was there. He said my name. He did say my name a few times. He said Theo. He said my name, Theo. Steve was a mensch. He was kind-hearted and big-hearted and tender-hearted. And he was a sweet man. He was even-keeled. There were times I wanted him to be, I would have liked him to have been less even-keeled. You know what I mean? Yeah, right. You know this, right? I wanted to, shake him and say, tell me more. I mean, how do you feel? Tell me something more. And we were able to do that some. We were able to do that some in April, and some when he came in for the wedding. He was a great listener. He was smart and so committed to his work, the nature of the work that he did. So committed to it. perseverant. I'm glad to have been a pair with him from 7 to 72. It's quite a history. He was a sweet man. I know I already said that. I couldn't say it enough. He was a great friend, and he was my dearest friend.
Thank you, Theo. I think there'll be some reoccurring themes in what I have to say this morning. In this week's Torah portion, Vayetze, we encounter a sweet and tender moment between Jacob and his soon-to-be wife, Rachel. Having traveled far from his family in Canaan, Jacob comes upon a well in the outskirts of Haran, a Mesopotamian town. The well is covered with a large rock, and Rachel is waiting for the rock to be moved so that she can water her flock. Jacob approaches the well and moves the rock, and thus begins the greatest love story of Genesis. Steve could have been Jacob, because the foundation of the relationship that blossoms from this moment is Jacob's kindness, thoughtfulness, and compassion. All are qualities that Steve exemplified. I have no doubt Steve would have pushed boulders out of the way for any of us here. Even with a life cut short, Steve lived a full life. He was an intellectual, but he was more than an intellectual. He was a professional, but he was more than a professional. He participated in a multitude of sporting activities, but he was more than his hobbies. He traveled the world, but he was more than a tourist. He was more than the sum of his parts, because in everything Steve did, he embodied his values. He lived what he believed. He was an example to those around him. He was truly aligned. Sylvia, Steve's sister-in-law, but sister, as I've learned, shared a story that her cousin wrote when she heard of Steve's death. Walking in the hills of Northern California with other family members, everyone may have been huffing and puffing a little bit, but this cousin happened to be in the back of the group. Steve found his way to the back to be with her throughout the walk. But Steve didn't just walk with her and talk with her. He left her feeling like she had done him the favor, not the other way around. Steve was always the guy in the back of the group, finding and staying near the people who might need a little extra help. He was the guy who looked for people who were not engaging at some gathering, and Steve would go and chat with that person. This is who Steve was. He listened to people, and he didn't just listen. He heard what they had to say. During Vietnam, Steve was a conscientious objector. And while holding CO status, his alternative service program was at a Chicago hospital, working in the back ward with patients just as our country was moving away from institutionalization. Steve served his country by serving those in need. No, he wasn't going to serve with a gun in hand. He would serve with an open hand to those in pain and distress in life. It sure sounds like the guy who would walk in the back of the group decades later to be with the slowest among us. He was a lifelong pacifist, but not only when it came to war. As much as he loved tennis, racquetball, golf, or any of his other sports, if he felt like someone was just a little too competitive, Steve might just find a way to stop playing with that person. Of course, we can't talk about Steve without talking about his love, Nan. Nan and Steve first met when Nan was in 8th grade at Olansing Rumby, a Reform Jewish summer camp in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. It would be a few summers before they started dating, but Steve was cute. He was a nice guy, and he was everybody's friend. Sounds pretty perfect to me. And while these are the qualities that Nan found attractive in Steve, Steve would say that it was his brother's car that won Nan over. After college, Steve moved from Minnesota to Chicago, where Nan was finishing up her last few years of school. They married in 1970. And in those first few years of marriage, as they both attended grad school at Northwestern and then transitioned into working life, things weren't always easy. Nan had a job working an hour south of Chicago, and Steve had a job working at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, more than an hour north of Chicago, and they only had one car. Steve and Nan would rise early in the morning. He would drive Nan to her job and then turn around and head to his job. This is their relationship, one of mutuality, support, and love. Nan, yesterday in my office you commented about the randomness of life. You suggested that life can be a lottery and that you won the Mega Millions when you met Steve. It's a good analogy, but not perfect, because I'm sure that he felt the same about you. You both hit the jackpot. While Steve had a love for tennis from an early age, he played competitively in high school and college. He would grow to develop a fondness for multiple racket sports. He had an ever-expanding series of physical activities that he loved. He was a runner, he played golf, he was a cyclist. And of course, as would be his nature, Steve encouraged Nan in these activities, and they often did them together. There was one other pastime for which Steve had a fondness, but let me preface this story by sharing the notion. In Jewish tradition, the eulogy, traditionally called a chesped, were meant to represent the true nature of a person. We try not to make a person out to be better or worse than he actually was in life. We don't make a saint into a sinner or a sinner into a saint. And so I share this one tidbit of Steve's life. Yes, Steve would write 6 or 7 books in his life. He would earn a master's and PhD, but Steve almost flunked out of college his freshman year. While Steve loved his physical activities, he also loved playing cards. Thankfully, the sheen of childhood washed away, and Steve was able to get his act together and become the professional and intellectual success he became. Among other things, it was Steve's incredible success that left his brothers basking in his glory. The 3 of them were so proud to be the Gill brothers. As I mentioned earlier, in this week's Torah portion, Jacob moved the large stone from atop the well for Rachel in an act of compassion. But this is actually the second stone that plays a central role in the Torah portion. This week's Torah portion also contains the well-known section of Jacob dreaming of angels on a ladder from heaven. He has this dream with his head resting on a rock that he used for a pillow. And when Jacob awakes from the dream and declares God was in this place and I did not even know it, he takes that rock that he used as a pillow and builds it into an altar for God. What a moment of optimism for Jacob as he transforms a rock into a structure of relationship with the divine. This optimism is another attribute Steve shared with Jacob. Throughout his life and continuing through his diagnosis and the last months of his life, Steve remained optimistic. He was optimistic that he would beat the odds. No, it wasn't a naivete. He was too smart for that. It was a true optimism and hope that if other people had beaten the odds, it could happen to him as well. And the reason we know that he wasn't just naive is that when his disease did deal him a blow, he kept walking forward. When he fell in tennis and could no longer play, he looked for another sport. He was sick, but that didn't stop him from traveling to Florida to play golf or Africa to see another part of the world. It was his eternal optimism that pushed him to never stop living. I don't know how Steve felt about death. It isn't something he talked about. But of course, many of us fear death. But deep down inside, it isn't really death that we fear, it's life. Have we truly lived? Is the profound question that death raises. Steve teaches us with his life, even as death approaches, never stop living, never stop exploring, never stop being. This is just one of the blessings he leaves us. May it be an eternal blessing for us all. We continue with El Maleh Rachamim, a prayer asking God to take hold of Steve's soul, to bind him up in the eternal bond of everlasting life. If you're able, please rise.
יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום, בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Steve Gill, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment we'll call for pallbearers. I'd like to remind everyone there will be no formal procession to the cemetery. Those of you planning on joining the family at the cemetery for the interment service, we would ask that as the casket leaves the temple today, you go directly to your cars, and we'll meet at the cemetery as soon as everybody gets there, or as many people as we know will get there, I should say. Thank you.